day of COVID?
In the world of smart recruiters. Well, like I said to the team, right? Last time I checked, our job is about connecting people to jobs at scale. And our job has just become much more important, I guess, right? So yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, are you okay?
Yeah,
good.
Mostly good, actually. So we use this moment to really charge forward. So whereas everybody, our competitors have all kind of reduced their workforce by 20%, 30%, 40%, 45% actually, never.
Wow.
We didn't cut anybody. Instead, we're really leaning in and pushing hard on the market. It seems to be paying off.
Good.
There's a lot of TA leaders out there that are saying, actually, now is a really good time to upgrade my ATS, right? Because it's like, it's like upgrading the engine of a car. It's much better, much easier when the car is parked. So
yeah. We're always complaining about how we're building the plane as it's flying, and now the plane's on the ground.
Exactly. Right.
Well, so let me. I'll introduce you. We'll do the radio thing, and then we'll get this going.
That sounds good.
Awesome. Okay. Welcome back to another episode of the Lauren Epstein Show. I'm your host, Lauren Epstein, here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. If you're watching us on YouTube, you are watching on our YouTube channel. And with me today, I have my very special guest, Jerome Ternynck. Jerome has become an oracle on how companies succeed by hiring the best talent. He leads SmartRecruiters, which is a software company that helps companies around the world reduce friction in hiring. His new book, Hiring Success: How Visionary CEOs Compete for the Best Talent, is a first-hand account of what a CEO should do and they should be focused on to build their talent acquisition functions. Jerome, congratulations on all the amazing things that you've been accomplishing with SmartRecruiters.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, and before we get to your book, I wanted to share that SmartRecruiters was recognized by Fosway as a core leader. They were ranked as a core leader in their talent acquisition space, for a second year in a row. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a good testament to all the hard work that our customers are actually doing, transforming TA and leveraging more modern technology, upgrading their ATS to drive hiring success.
And so the book that you wrote, by the way, I loved it. I thought it was just fantastic.
Thank you.
Of course, I found a couple of grammar errors, but it's an awesome book. So it was written by a CEO for CEOs who are thinking about talent. So if you're a recruiter, probably not exactly the right book, but you could read it and get a lot of value out of it. I think if you're a business leader or a TA leader, I think there's a ton of value in it. And I thought, we talked about your book. I thought it was, interesting read. So you say, is there anything you wanted to start off with? Because I have a ton of questions, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk.
No, I think, the genesis of the book really was the fact that most CEOs put hiring great talent at the top of their priority list, right? In good times and bad times, it doesn't change. It's like, hey, if I have the right team, I'm going to win. But the vast majority of companies actually don't believe that they hire great people, right? And so there's actually a disconnect between the desire of executives to hire amazing talent and the execution that's happening in recruiting, where recruiting has historically been measured by time to fill and cost per hire, faster and cheaper, never really been given a chance to hey, how do we invest in recruiting to get better talent, just like we invest in marketing to get more customers. And so the reason why I wrote this book from a CEO standpoint is, you want to hire amazing talent? Well, here's how you do it, right? And the idea is really to make the case to invest in great recruiting and enjoy the returns.
Yeah, I love how you framed in the beginning of the book that there's three things that we have in business. We have great ideas, money, and talent. And there's lots of great ideas and there's lots of money, but there's not a lot of the right talent.
No, clearly the talent is the primary constraint for businesses to succeed. It's the main difference between a great company and a bad company. And it actually ripples through. People think, oh, talent, you need to have the right C-suite, the right directors. Then below, it doesn't really matter. That's not true, right? I was actually discussing this the other day, but have you ever met a jerk in an Apple store?
No,
No, right?
they're
And
all
what
so
would
nice.
right? And what would your opinion be of Apple if you did? It would change,
Yeah, I don't think I'd
right?
go back. Yeah, it would be
Yeah,
very
right.
bad.
So at all levels, amazing hiring is actually what builds companies and what makes the difference. The rest, ideas and money, you can easily find those.
Yeah, and one of the things I loved about the book and really about your business is that you're in the business of helping companies hire right. And if you don't know Jerome, SmartRecruiters grew their enterprise business by 60% in 2019. And so he's speaking from experience. They're hiring, they've hired 100 people in a year, and they had to make sure they were all the right people in a very competitive market with software developers and marketing people in San Francisco. So when he talks about this, I think, and I'm speaking to the audience, when you talk about this, Jerome, you're speaking not just from you own this company and this is the kind of software you sell, but you use this. And in the book, you cite some of your successes, but also some of your missteps. I thought that was really interesting. And I wanted to talk about the formula you lay out for CEOs to hire top talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it really comes down to one, have great sourcing. So it's a marketing exercise. You need to attract great talent that want to talk to you. And this really is a marketing exercise, like pure marketing. You segment your talent. Where are you going to find them? How there are different channels, advertising, referrals, direct sourcing, marketing. Like, just it is a marketing exercise. Second, once you have a good flow of talent, how good are you at actually selecting the right person? And this goes into collaboration and having a good hiring process that is strong at identifying exactly the person you need. So one, build a good pipeline of candidates. Two, be good at consistently selecting the right person. Don't trust your judgment. So in those two areas, there's a lot of learnings and a lot of ways you can easily optimize recruiting.
So I think some companies will say, well, we're not that kind of company. It doesn't matter what we hire. I've been doing this for 20 or 30 years and fine. We put an ad in the paper, we put some internet things, and it just keeps going along. But you make some really interesting arguments about high performers, and that there's a delta between a high performer and everyone else that you might hire.
Yeah.
And that's probably true for every business, right? I mean, any kind of business.
It is true. The ratio differ, but for complex jobs, the performance ratio between a low performer and a high performer is 1:8. So you need 8 people to do the job of one. In typical software development is one, you can have 8 engineers or one really good engineer. In a less sophisticated job, you get to a lower ratio of like a 1:2 or a 1:1.5. But for sure, across all industries, there is a gain in productivity, a gain in outcome by raising the bar of talent. And it's easy, right? There is 2 versions of your barista at Starbucks. There's the one who smiles and gets you to buy a sandwich, and there's the one who doesn't and makes you not wanting to come back tomorrow.
Yeah, and the first one will remember your order.
Yes, indeed, and will greet you by your first name tomorrow, so you'll come back. So it really, at all levels, absolutely all levels in an organization, I would not dismiss any human being as like, yeah, these people are not important. Whether they're good or they're great doesn't make a difference. It's not true. If they're good or if they're great makes a massive difference, let alone if they're not good, right? Which would be a hiring mistake. But even if you avoid hiring mistakes, yeah, good enough. No, there's no such thing as good enough in recruiting.
Yeah, and I think if I'm running a company, I can just look at like my top performer and my other performers who are not as good, and make a mental note of like, well, how much more money does that person make? How much better is that for the business? And that's my multiplier.
Yes.
And if I had more of that people and less of the other people, you could even just calculate out like what's the,
Yeah. Yes.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, you gave a great
So
example of how much longer it took for SmartRecruiters to roll a new product out when you didn't hire the right person. And you said it cost you $1 million.
Yeah. Yeah, that those mistakes are expensive, right? And people that are not performing to the job, that are the wrong fit, in fact, for the job, right? And it's not that
Just got to
this
fix my
person is a
lighting here. But go on, I'm listening. I just got to fix my lighting.
it's not that that a person is actually bad necessarily, but really that the job fit is the difference, right? Which
Yeah.
is why in measuring quality of hire, we introduced the net hiring score, which is an NHS, which works like an NPS and measures job fit and gives you, it's a simple question, 90 days after a hire, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a fit is this new candidate for the job? Question you ask to the manager. And you actually ask the same to the candidate. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a fit is this job for you, right? And then you take the 9 and 10, the ones who are like, yeah, perfect. I love my job, or I love this person, right? And you take the 9 and 10 minus the 1 to 5, the ones who are like, yeah, not sure about this. I think I made a mistake, either hiring or accepting the job. And you end up with a positive, negative score, just like an NPS, which gives you a pulse of actually how good are you hiring? Are you at hiring great fits? The first time we ran this survey was a big technology company here in San Francisco, that had everything you think would be good for recruiting. And we ran the survey. In 52% of cases, either the manager or the candidate or both said, no, not a fit. We took the data to the CEO. It's like, what do you mean? Well, yeah, 52% of the people you hired this year are like, yeah, wasn't really a good fit. Like, where is your company going? And that doesn't get measured. It's really one of the biggest investments you make is hiring people, and you do not measure the return on this investment. You do not measure your return on hiring, and therefore you do not optimize your hiring practices. So it's really taking a very business and a very ROI-centric view of recruiting. It's kind of what I was trying to do in the book.
Yeah, I thought that throughout the book you kind of you give some really clear examples, some templates, and I loved learning about you. I didn't know that you started your career in Prague when the Iron Curtain fell, which is kind of cool. I mean, that's a really interesting experience to be in a country that was controlled by the Soviet Union, and now to be like, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, exactly, and especially to be a recruiter there, right? Because I came there as a young French graduate. I wanted to start a business, and I was asking around, so what can you do in this country? And people are like, yeah, you can do anything, right? Because there was virtually everything to be built, right? But everybody said, but it's so hard to find good people. And I was 23, I didn't have any capital. And so I thought, well, I should start a recruitment agency. And so I did, although I didn't speak Czech, but I had to learn parts of that. But what was really interesting about being a recruiter in those days in Prague is that nobody had no experience in nothing. Right? So you really had to hire people based on their attitude, on their potential. Right. So we'd have, like, I don't know, L'Oreal, who was the customer, would come to us and say, I need a marketing director with 10 years experience in consumer goods to look after this part of our brands. And like, sorry, sir, nobody has 10 years experience in marketing here. Like, marketing didn't exist 2 years ago, right? Like, okay. So I need someone who at least has a degree in marketing and we can train them. It's like, yeah, sorry, nobody has a degree in marketing because they don't teach marketing in university. And then they would go, okay, so I need someone who speaks some English and has a good marketing mindset. I was like, that we can find. So it's really interesting to live through those times, and it has actually shaped my hiring practices.
Yeah.
To be very focused on the potential of people. And I talk about this in the book in saying that your interview criteria, your interview scorecard should focus on the must achieves, not on the must haves. So must have 10 years experience in marketing, right? Who cares? Must achieve, must build a great marketing function for us, must double our revenue per whatever metric. So run your interview scorecard as, what do I expect this person to achieve? How would I rate the performance of this person in 6 months or in a year? And that's your interview scorecard. And very often people make a mistake, is like they say, okay, I want somebody that needs to achieve ABC. And therefore, I think in order to achieve ABC, you should have a degree at Stanford, worked for Google, done this, done that, done that. No, right?
Yeah.
So rate people against must achieves,
Yeah.
not must haves.
Yeah. I've had a lot of
improve your
CEOs.
diversity too.
Yes. I've had a lot of CEOs say, hire somebody who worked at Google or Facebook. And I'm like, why? That makes no sense. You know, this week we have the SpaceX Dragon launching, which of course was postponed and it should be tomorrow. But I grew up as a kid in the 60s, and I remember the space program was a big part of my childhood. And I remember my mom getting me out of the backyard, coming in, watching the television and splashing, and the ship splashing down. And by what you're saying, I'm reminded that the first space program had nobody experienced in building a spaceship that could go to the moon, let alone come back, and all of the complexities. And we did it. And I think there's like a dissonance in our minds about, we've all done something for the first time and made it work. And yet we just don't think other people can do that. And I notice that's kind of a big bias around just human beings. Like, I want to know that you've done it a whole bunch of times for some brand name company, to somehow that makes it you're going to want to do here. And usually the opposite is true. If they've been somewhere else, they want to do something different.
Yes. Yeah. Or do they have the appetite to do it again? And
yeah, exactly. The appetite to do it again.
Are they going to do it better? I agree. And I think, this speaks to our lack of confidence in our selection process. So the easiest way for me to make a decision on hiring somebody is to say, have you done it before? Oh, you have done it before. Okay, so now I feel safe, I can hire you, right? And that's because we do not know how to evaluate people properly.
Yeah,
and
right.
We don't do that because we don't have a good structured selection criteria, right? Which in the book, I really double click on this: collaborative hiring, so several interviewers, a clear scorecard that focuses on the must achieves, and a good validation. And with that, you actually make really, really good interview decision or hiring decisions that are backed by the right criteria. If you do not have structure in your interview, structure in your scorecards, structure in the collaboration around it, then you are actually just saying, oh, I want a copycat. I want the same as before, right? And that's where it comes from, right? And you're ignoring amazing talent.
My phone's ringing. Hang on a second. Okay, well, that's never happened before. It's kind of funny. You know, out of the studio, not being in the radio studio because it's closed, it's so disorienting to do interviews.
Yes.
But sorry, you were saying that people are, if you don't have a structured system, then it's going to be who knows what.
Yeah, it's going, and you're going to revert back to have you done it before?
Yeah.
Which really is not a good indicator of future performance.
No, that's very true. I always found it, the most interesting thing about recruiting for me was in the interview room after the candidate left and the managers were talking. And I always thought that conversation revealed a ton about what was really going on. And what I noticed was that when everyone liked them, and it was a good hire, if in the interview room it took 3 seconds, yep, we're all a yes. But if there was arguing going on, that tended not to work out. Those hires never worked out. And you mentioned in the book, when people hesitate, that's a no. And I grew up learning that, like, hesitation's no. If I say, hey, you want to do this, and if you hesitate, that means no. You're just not willing
Yeah.
to say no, but it means no.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think the chapter is actually called Maybe is a No.
Yeah.
And it's very clear. If you have doubts, then just don't go ahead.
Yeah, right.
And that's why it's important to have a good sourcing at the beginning, so you have enough great candidates to choose from. Because the moment you compromise, you're just going to regret it later.
Yeah, and you talk about a lot of, I mean, all the common ways of sourcing, right? But I like how you kind of shy away from the direct sourcing. And I think for me, this is also because I grew up direct sourcing, right? I grew up in an agency. I would give somebody $50 and they'd give me a copy of their employee directory, and I would just call through that. I was in New York, and I would just, go to the corner of this street and that street. And I think the reasoning, and I want to hear from you about it, is because you have become more data centric. The recruiting business has become more data centric, and just making phone calls is kind of unpredictable. But there's more predictive ways of kind of doing the whole business.
Yeah, I think the whole way we market to people has evolved. I mean, I don't know, back when you were paying $50 to get the directory, every salesperson on the planet was doing the same, right? They were also smile while you dial with a phone book. But over time, actually, the marketeers, the people selling products, insurance or whatever, cars or whatever, have evolved to way much more sophisticated forms of marketing, where they first put out some campaigns for you. They get you to attend a webinar, they get your name, you download something from them, then they nurture you, and then they qualify you. And if you reach a certain stage and you have certain criteria, then they actually call you, and that has optimized the acquisition of customers. So this whole digitalization of marketing that has happened in the last 2 decades has greatly left recruiting out. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we were given a better directory, which is called LinkedIn. We still have the same phone or emails, and we're still going one after one. And in the book, I take the example of this campaign where one marketer actually outperformed 10 sourcers, right? Because I mean, the challenge was hiring data scientists, and they just say, okay, let me put out an ebook about data science that was written by the chief scientist, really interesting stuff that only data scientists can read. Put it on the web with a lead capture form that says, hey, download the ebook, first name, last name, email address, and 2 questions like what technology are you interested in, right? Next thing you know, they had 1,000 people download the ebook. Of course, everybody's interested in that. Of that, 800 were actually qualified data scientists. They run a webinar where people could come and ask questions about the book. They had a meetup. Bottom line, a month later, they had 400 candidates ready to engage, thinking, actually, if there was an opportunity, I'd be willing to talk.
Right.
Like, you cannot, like, if you want 400 data scientists ready to talk, you can put 10 sourcers on that.
Right.
Yeah, and they're not going to get there, right?
And the way that they came in, the doorway was very appealing to them.
Yes.
Because by giving them knowledge, they're interested in that.
Yes. Yeah, so it is really applying marketing techniques to recruiting. And I think the digitalization of recruiting and the modernization of our recruiting tech stack is really what's driving this. And modern TA leaders understand this very well.
Yeah, I think, so I started using your software in 2013 or when it was free. It was a while ago. And I loved it. And I loved it because it was so easy, but it was, it was all about putting people through a process. It wasn't like, I remember the first flat file database I used in like 1996, and it was just like useless other than, right? It wasn't part of the function. And once I kind of got hooked, it's, you see it, you can't unsee it. And I think a lot of people, either talent acquisition leaders or recruiters, once they use some really cool technology, they go someplace else, and if it's not there, it's very frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a hard business case to make because, like for the recruiter, it's like, well, they don't have the influence to say, you guys got to change.
Yeah. Well, we're actually helping people with that business case right now, because a lot of TA leaders who find themselves today in organizations that are on hiring freeze or slow hiring are like, hey, perfect time to upgrade my tech stack, right? It's like upgrading the engine of a car. It's much easier when the car is parked. But then they turn around and say, okay, how do I build a business case for the CFO to do that, right? And the business case here is simple. It's like, hey, we have an outdated applicant tracking system from like 15 years ago, right? This thing doesn't convert candidates. The managers are not using it. My recruiters are not productive. So can I take this system and the various CRM and other stuff we piled on top of it over the years, consolidate it to one talent acquisition suite? This modern TA suite will actually convert candidates much better. So we'll reduce our sourcing and advertising costs by at least 30 to 40%. And then it's going to help me engage hiring managers better and make my recruiters much more productive, which means I probably can restart hiring with like 2/3 of the recruiting team I had before, or at least gain those efficiencies. Here is the spreadsheet, CFO, can I go ahead? And the CFO is like, yeah, actually good idea, right? Good initiative. And this is, in times like today, we're seeing an acceleration of digital transformation in recruiting, actually.
I want to come back after we take a quick break and talk about hiring budgets, because it's something I've always been passionate about. So we're going to take a quick station break. For those of you listening to us on radio, you're listening to the show on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. And I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. We'll be back after this quick break. So welcome back to the show. I'm Lorne, and I'm here with Jerome Ternynck of SmartRecruiters. And we're going to talk about hiring budgets. So often a CEO would say to me, as either the recruiter or the recruiting leader, next year we're going to hire 50 more people than we did this year. And I would always think, well, how am I going to do that? Right? Hiring costs money. I would always have a cost per hire. And they would never say, and here's the money to do it. And I wrote an article on LinkedIn about that once, where if the CEO says we're going to do this kind of growth, then the CFO says, well, okay, well, this is what it's going to cost. We're going to work together and figure out what the cost is to get there. And then you really kind of drill down into the hiring budgets by breaking them up into categories. So I wanted you to talk about that, because I thought your take was really innovative and something I had not really thought about before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when we talk about cost per hire and we measure ourselves with cost per hire, we set ourselves up for failure, in fact, right? Because first, the cost per hire is like, you come to me and say, hey, Jerome, my cost per hire is $3,222. I'm like, yeah, whatever, right? Like, how does that actually mean something for me as an executive? But then even worse, when no one's ever been to a management meeting where they say, hey, next year, I think we should increase our cost per hire. Why would you increase your cost per hire? But as a CEO, I'm like, oh yeah, why not? If I can get better people, if I can get them more on time. So if you're going to increase my hiring velocity, if you're going to increase my quantity, my net hiring score, then actually, should I invest more in recruiting? What's in it for me? How does my investment in recruiting compare to my peers or to my competitors? And so we here measure recruiting budget not as a cost per hire, but simply as a hiring budget, which is as the total cost of recruiting divided by the salary of new hires. So it's a percentage of salary. So now instead of saying I spend $3,222, you say I spend 7%. 7% of new hire salary I spend in recruiting. Actually, you can now start to distinguish between departments. I actually spend 10% for the senior position, and I spend 5% for the new grads, for example. And then as a CEO, I can go and say, well, 7% of new hire salary. How does that compare to the average? Well, industry average, sir, is more, or ma'am, is more at 9%. Okay, so if we were to increase to 9%, and now you're having a business conversation, not a cost reduction conversation.
Right.
And it's a subtle change, but it drives such a different level of conversation for TA leaders that have adopted it.
Yeah, I like your use of the phrase net hiring score. I think that's just it's just awesome. So one of the things you said in the book is that there are candidates there. And I don't know if that's always the truth. I kind of felt like I should challenge you on that, because I don't think candidates are in fact always there. I was hiring for a government agency where their Air Force base was 100 miles from anywhere, and they wanted a Java developer. And, even within 100 miles, there were no Java developers.
Yes.
I don't want to say that because I think that in some cases that is the fact, but we're talking about most time. And I want to go back to the scorecard, because often I think the first step in a job is one deciding, well, what do we need, right? Like someone decides, well, I need someone to do something. And that's never really thought through. And I think your scorecard approach is a great way to kind of evoke, like, well, what's the point? What are we doing here? What's the why?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think the writing a good scorecard for a job, which are what do we expect this person to achieve again, right? Not what we expect this person to be. What we expect this person to achieve is a very good way to actually compromise on the profile. I think the mistake we make is we turn the must achieves into must haves. And then that becomes the profile. I want somebody who worked at Google, and I want somebody with 5 years experience. If the job is, we need somebody who's going to write amazing Java code for this Army base or Air Force base that's out of nowhere, that's a reality, right? And from there, you can actually start searching for people and define a very wide profile, which could be someone who actually happens to live there and takes a course in Java, which could be somebody that's already in the Air Force that want to learn Java, which could be somebody who doesn't need to be on site and can do it remotely. So then you start to actually match your needs to the reality of the market, because you're absolutely right. There's not always the right candidate, as in the perfect profile defined by the manager in the way they translated their needs into a profile. So don't let managers translate the needs into a profile. That's irrelevant. Actually, this is the job of the recruiter to anticipate what kind of profile and build that profile to get to the must achieves, and start with a good scorecard. And SmartRecruiters, I internally for our own hiring, I've set a very simple rule: no scorecard, no hiring. We just don't start. So if you're a manager and you go, I need this, I'm like, okay, what's the scorecard? That's the first question you get.
Yeah.
And if once you have defined your scorecard, you're like, oh, okay, now I understand what we're trying to achieve. Let me go and source candidates whom I think could achieve those things.
And the scorecard is really telling you kind of what's going on. What's this all about? What's like, not only what are they going to do, but what are they going to do in relationship to the rest of the company? Like, do we have somebody already doing that? Sometimes, I mean, I've been around the C table, and everyone's like, I want to hire 20 more of this, and 30 more of this, and 40 more of this. And then the CEO says, okay, but how are you going to support that? And they're like, well, I'll take one, or I'll take two, because there's just no one really has I've always wanted to get that over the horizon. Tell me what I can work on today, because it's going to generate a result in a month or 2 months, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of the sourcing work. And I think do you think starting with the scorecard is the way to go?
Yes, 100%. 100%, because it forces the conversation of what do you actually need this person to achieve. And if the answer is not clear, then don't hire.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's very simple. So it's a very healthy conversation for the leaders to ask of their hiring managers, and for the hiring managers to actually communicate with recruiters, and for the hiring teams to evaluate candidates, right? What do we want this person to achieve? And that becomes the evaluation criteria.
Yeah, and you talk about referrals, and I think referrals are like the kind of the stepchild of hiring. It's not sexy, but most hires are made by referrals, and they're kind of ignored. And there's a lot of folks doing things. I mean, there's software to help with referrals, and there's a movement and a lot of text written on it. But and I know that, we're kind of in the minority of TA, right? Most recruiting is not done this way. Speak to me about your thoughts about referrals, because you say some things there that I think are pretty innovative. And before you do, I wanted to just share. When I was recruiting in Silicon Valley, which was where I was making the most money back in 2000, 2001, the company I worked for paid $7,500 for every referral, plus every quarter they had a lottery for $40,000. So anyone who made a referral in that got put into a lottery, and there was only like 160 referrals, and a lot of them were multiple. So if you made a referral, and you won, you made 50 grand.
Yeah. Wow. So I think on referrals, the first question is, what is a referral? And a referral can be an introduction. Hey, Lorna, you should talk to Jerome. He's actually looking for work, and he has asked me to introduce you. Okay, that's not a referral. I'm not telling you Jerome is a great guy. Right? I'm just saying, hey, here. Or it's a recommendation, which is like, yeah, I worked with Jerome in the past. He's actually really good. I think we should hire him. And it may or may not include an introduction, right? Because this recommendation can happen after the person has applied. And we actually we are not very clear with employees. What do we want? Do you want introductions? Because I have 500 people in my address book. Should I introduce you to all 500 of them? Or
in fact,
which one do you want, right?
The SmartRecruiters tool allows you to make referrals through the tool to your whole LinkedIn network.
Exactly, right? So you can do it very easily.
I click buttons and boom, I'm like, hey, I made my 1,000 referrals.
Yeah, but that's exactly, LinkedIn had a product, LinkedIn Referrals, a few years ago that they ended up sunsetting. And this was the problem. The volumes were too high. They were too successful because they were good at making introductions, but not recommendations. So that's one. And on the topic of money, all studies actually show that money is a counter incentive for both parties. Because now I'm like, okay, Lorna, I'm going to refer you for this job. And now if you get the job, I'm going to make 50K. And now you're thinking, okay, are you doing this because you want to help me? Are you doing this because you want to help the company? Or are you doing this because you actually want to make money? And I think monetary rewards are totally destructive of good referral programs.
Yeah.
So, and in the book, I talk more about this. And you need incentives. It can be gamified incentives. There's a lot of ideas about incentives, but pure monetary rewards are counterproductive to referrals.
Yeah, it's funny. I think after reading it, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I worked at a company where the monetary referral was spread out over like 2 years. And it almost made it like it wasn't really anything, Yeah. And then the first example I gave you, it seemed to me at that company that the people who were doing the referrals were kind of like undercover recruiters. They had a recruiter inside of them. No matter what their day job was, they were networkers, they were connectors, they were going to do this no matter what. And that was like the right that percentage of people just did that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good idea. I have to say I hadn't really framed it that way or ever really thought about it that way, but I think it's spot on. You said give people tickets to a football game, right?
Yes, I mean that's this is a really good way of rewarding it. So my advice was first clarify what is a referral. So I want referrals. I want it to be an introduction and a recommendation.
Yeah.
Please meet my friend Lorna, who would be amazing for this job. I vouch for him.
Yeah.
That's a referral. If I don't vouch for you, it's not a referral. If I don't introduce you, it's not a referral. So it's both. It's a referral, it's an introduction, and a recommendation. So that's the silver lining. And then for that, then reward with a gamified approach. Donation to a charity of your choice, concert tickets to concerts, or smaller incentives, meal voucher, like take your partner to a dinner, compliments of the house. Or I ran a program once which was for successful referrals. We would pay for a 2-day or 3-day weekend in a city of your choice, right? This was in Europe. And there was only one condition. You had to send a postcard to the office. And over time, we had this wall of postcards sent by employees who had referred somebody and successfully spent 3 days with their loved one in Rome or in Venice or in Amsterdam or wherever they wanted to go, right? That worked really, really much better than, my paycheck increased a bit.
Jerome, there is a marketer inside of you.
Yes.
I wanted to talk to you about the job posting, because so back in 2002, I worked for a consulting company here in DC, and we were tasked with hiring project managers, and the project managers were going to go around the world to US airports and hire the TSA agents. This was the formation of the TSA. And it was the beginning. And so they were going to go around to, American airports, 470 airports, and set up these teams and do all this stuff. And they had all the responsibility and none of the authority. And it was horrible conditions. And everyone I spoke to, I said, this is going to suck. You're going to hate it, but this is what it is. And all of my guys lasted through the engagement. And what reminded me of that was that in your book, you talk about the ad, and I didn't know this, but Sir Shackleton, who was an explorer, and his famous journey through the North. Anyway, do you remember what his job ad said?
Yeah, it's something around like men wanted for hazardous journey and return unlikely, low money but fame in case of success, right?
Yeah.
Right, and it's the perfect job ad, because what is good about this job ad, it was short, but it actually attracted the right kind of people, right? And this is actually really interesting, is that how does job advertising attract the right kind of people? So if you wanted to join that, you were going to be you were going to enjoy an adventure. You were not going to make money, but you might become famous, right?
Yeah.
Those are selection criteria. Right.
Right
there, the ad was actually a selection, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's I think there's a big delta, right, between job ads I read and what really is going on.
Yes, and I say in the book, I said a job ad is an ad. It's not a job description. It's an ad. It's actually there to attract the right people to come and talk to you. And I think the publishing of job description, this has to stop. Actually, we should not be publishing our job descriptions. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense for the candidate. It doesn't make sense for the candidate. You hire 20 variations of salespeople to sell this product, that product, to this segment, to this market, in that region, you have 20 jobs for salespeople. I'm a salesperson. I want to work for your company. Like, how do you want me to pick these 20 jobs? I don't know which product, which this, which that, right? It's your job. I'm going to tell you I'm a great salesperson. I want to work for you. Like, you pick whatever job description and where you want to assign me on which rec. And I think the disconnection of jobs description from job advertising is going to happen, and it's going to happen right now as we are in this pandemic. Why? Because when you post a job description right now, people just don't know. And what do? They apply. So you post your job description, and within 24 hours, you're receiving an average of 200 resumes right now. 199 of those are totally irrelevant. Waste of time for the candidate who's never going to hear back from you, and waste of time for you who's going to read through the resume. And so I think people are just going to go back to, oh no, actually I advertise my jobs only to pre-qualified candidates. I advertise my jobs to people that already know are good, right? So and that means a much better experience on both sides. So I actually think we're going to see job advertising evolve a lot over the next 2 years.
Yeah. So back in the 90s, when I started agency recruiting, I went to a movie one night, and coming out of the theater were these three guys. And on the back of one of their shirts, it said Unix Systems Administrator. So I said, excuse me, are you a Unix Systems Administrator? And he said, yeah. I said, well, are you looking for a job? And as soon as I said that, the two people with him were his boss and his manager, and they had just watched the movie. So his boss, they ran interference. He's like, he works with me. And I turned him into a client. But it's like, like if you could walk around and people had a shirt and you knew exactly who it was. I mean, obviously this is a non-automated version, but that's what you want, right? You want to find, you want to create, and I love the way you use, and I've always felt this way, is like reduce the friction. Wherever there's friction, get rid of it. And I think the world that we're living in now with Amazon and with Uber and et cetera, what basically they're doing is just giving you the same things, but in less time and less hassle. and that all that saves money.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes,
I wanted to
does.
talk to you.
It does.
What did you say?
Yeah, I was just confirming that yes, it does actually. Less is more in recruiting.
Yeah, less is more. Quick good hires are cheaper than ones that take months and months and months or years and years and years. So
Yeah, but I meant in candidate volumes, right? Like if you go to a recruiter and you say, I have an advertising solution and I can give you some candidates. They're like, okay, yeah. But then the interesting question is, okay, I have 1 million candidates. Can I send you 1 million candidates?
no.
And they'll be like, no, don't send. Oh, okay. So what are you really looking for? Well, I'm really looking for good candidates. Okay, so actually the volume of candidates that all the job boards are fighting to send you as many candidates as possible doesn't make any sense, right? What really makes sense is your candidate to interview ratio, which is the quality of candidates you're receiving, right? And if your candidate to interview ratio is over 10, I mean 10 useless resume to find one that's worthy of interview, then you're basically wasting your time with that source, right? And today on job boards, your candidate to interview ratio goes all the way to 50 or even 100 on some job boards, right? So you're like, okay, I got to sift through 100 resume to find one that I'm going to take through interview. Like, no, please, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I used to do that. I get stacks of resumes, and I have to just.
Yeah. Yes.
So
well, yeah. That's another story.
Not a long time ago. We don't do that anymore. So I wanted to talk to you about two things. One, diversity, because you talk about that, and it's a very, particularly today, right now, is a very unfortunate time in our history around diversity. But also, and then later, reverse recruiting. So let's talk about reverse recruiting first, and then I think we'll finish up with our conversation on diversity. So I love what you did at your conference, which I wasn't at, but tell us about reverse recruiting. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, reverse recruiting is an initiative we actually started about 2 years ago formally. And what we're doing is we're encouraging recruiters or hiring managers or people that want to actually coach and mentor job seekers. And we've done that in various communities. But at our latest conference, we did a live event. We had almost 200 job seekers from underprivileged community, people who had criminal records, refugees or disabilities, people that have a hard time to access the employment market because the recruiters have processes to almost eliminate them, right? And certainly not to include them. And so we actually match them up with recruiters, TA leaders from big companies. And I think today, in today's market, this is something that is becoming very, very important. And I would encourage anyone who's watching to actually become a reverse recruiter. How? Just find one person that has been made redundant during the COVID and tell them, hey, how can I help? How can I help? Can I help? Can I review your resume? Can I cheer you up? Can I look through my network, see if I can make an intro? Do you want to practice your interview that you finally landed an interview? Like, do you want us to practice? Do you want some advice? Like, how can I help? And that makes you a reverse recruiter, a mentor to job seekers. There's 50 million people that actually are looking for employment in the US right now. So there's no shortage of people you can help. And I would really encourage everybody to do that, even if you are yourself a job seeker, maybe especially you're yourself a job seeker, because you can help. The answer is you can help, right? And we've taken the reverse recruiting movement a step further here in really driving mentor-mentee relationships between people who are seeking employment and people who want to help.
And so if you Google reverse recruiting, SmartRecruiters comes up first. Yes. And they've made it their corporate social responsibility pledge, which is awesome. Yes. I would highly encourage you to check that out. It's really terrific.
Thank
I mean,
you.
It's it's really terrific. One of the things that they're doing, just a sidebar, at Amazon and probably some other companies, is that they're acting they're helping the candidates out by being their recruiter and finding them a job at the company. So when I first started recruiting, I would, call someone up and say, look, I'll find you a job, because it was that was how it was. And that seems to have come back, which is really nice. And I think in part what you're talking about is the helpful version of that.
Yes.
To be
Yes, it is.
helpful to people.
Yeah, and I think everybody can do it. You can be a reverse recruiter tomorrow.
Yeah,
so
I like that.
Arne, I'll call you next week to hear who have you helped.
You're calling me out? Are you calling me out?
I'm
All right,
you out.
got it. I will. Yeah, on it.
Yeah.
Consider it done. So, I'm glad you kind of left a section in your book about diversity and talk about it in a lot of different ways. You packed a lot into that piece. So when you think of the word diversity, what do you think of? What does it make you feel or have in your mind?
Beauty, richness, creativity, ecosystem. Like diversity is what this planet is. It's who we are. It's what makes us living. I opened a chapter on diversity with a comparison on diversity of ecosystems, right? The richness of ecosystem, the interdependence of ecosystems. And I think diversity in organization is not an option. It's not the right thing to do. It's not because the government says so, or because I want to be. No, it's actually pure business performance. Diverse organization, diverse teams perform better than non-diverse teams, right? And I was taking the example of, like, imagine you go for the US championship of trivia, trivia night. Pick your team. Who are you going to pick? Your 5 football buddies who all know nothing else but football, or are you going to try and find 5 really different people who cover a wider spectrum? Of course, a diverse team always performs better. And so I think this starts with this, right? Diversity is a business performance topic. It is not a I need to feel good topic. And then from there, you can think, how do you actually influence diversity, and it starts in hiring, the diversity in hiring, obviously.
Yeah, you pointed out that in the population of, I guess, either CEOs or business leaders, that 4.5% of them are named David, and 4.1% of them are women. So there are fewer women as business leaders than there are men named David.
Yes, yeah. This was CEO, FTSE CEO from a few years ago. Yeah, it's scary.
The thing, and I want to come back to this because there's always a business case. I know somebody's listening to this who's thinking like, well, how does this help my bottom line? I mean, we've talked about numbers a couple of times. But the truth is that we've been working on efficiencies in business for a long time. I mean, in the 60s and 70s, it was manufacturing. And we've kind of gotten manufacturing down to, a bottle of Coke costs as little as it's going to cost, right? And now we've got this distribution thing, kind of, we can get it to you in hours or in less than a day. When I was a kid, it was 4 to 6 weeks. And all these things create revenue. They create top line revenue. And I don't know why business leaders, and I mean all business leaders, aren't running to embrace diversity, because it's out there. It's like, you want to make more money, just hire more people that represent a diverse way of thinking, a diverse way of doing things, a diverse frame, and you'll earn more money.
Yeah, it's as simple as that.
Nobody can argue with that.
Mm-hmm. No.
So
no, but
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, everything is designed in hiring because diversity starts in hiring, right? If you hire people that are all the same, then you're not going to have diversity, right? So it starts in hiring, and everything in hiring, for the reasons we were discussing a minute ago, is designed for discrimination. It's like the safest the safest choice in hiring is someone who has done this job before and who looks like me, right? If you actually hire somebody who hasn't done this job before or hasn't graduated from this university, hasn't had and doesn't look like you, ooh, this is a risk, right? And I think we really here, we have a role to play as TA leaders to set up the processes internally that drives a diversity of thinking in evaluation. So I'm going back to the scorecard, having a scorecard that's like 3 or 4 people fill in the same interview scorecard. It's cards down, so you don't see what others have said before you submit your own result, and you make decisions based on actual real performance criteria, not on, okay, did this person work at Facebook and went to Stanford? A lack of, and then removing the discrimination.
Yeah, by the way, if they went to Stanford, likely they got their parents paid to get them in.
Of course, right? And I mean, there's this
That's
famous,
a cheap shot.
yeah, but it's a cheap one. But the parents paid, or parents were alumni, right? This is a network, right?
It is.
And I forgot who did this experiment, but
the professor at Stanford. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. He took his work and he gave it to other people, and other people could do it just as well as his students.
Yeah, actually, I think on the final exams, the first Stanford student was number 100 out of 500 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that diversity of talent makes good business sense, but it will not happen. You will not drive diversity unless you have a proper hiring process. This will not happen. Right? You can source diversely, you can have more diverse sourcing, but you will continue to discriminate unless you change your hiring process. This is really important, right? And it's at the resume screening level. Who screens resumes, right? The same resume sent to 100 companies in the UK by the BBC 2 years ago. One is named Adam, one is named Mohammed. Adam got 4 times more callbacks than Mohammed. Same resume, only the name was changed, right? That's today in big companies in the UK. The same applies in the US. All studies are there. So remove discrimination at the screening level by automating this and letting an AI tell you, what's a good match here, and really don't let names and stuff be part of it. And then have a proper interview process with scorecards and collaborative, and a hiring team that is diverse. Right? So put a hiring team that is actually has diversity built in. If your hiring team is not diverse, you're not going to end up with diverse candidates.
So we can go on, but I'm going to take a quick pause. And just for the folks who are listening to the radio, thanks for listening to the radio show. You've been listening to the Lauren Epstein Show here on 96.7 FM in Arlington, Virginia. And we are going to continue with Jerome for those of you who want to see the rest of this on YouTube. So what are some of the great ways, other than what you've said, other ways to increase diversity in the hiring process?
It's diversity of sourcing. So source from more diverse backgrounds. Don't restrict, and I think remote work here is going to help actually, right? Because your next data scientist might be a mom at home in Brazil, frankly, why not? And so source diversely, and reduce bias in resume review, reduce bias in interviewing, and then think about inclusion and building the inclusion into your process, right? Because the very process itself can be a problem. I take the example of Microsoft, who designed the hiring process for people that were somewhere on the autism spectrum. And for someone with autism, the very idea of appearing in a job interview is actually the opposite of where they feel comfortable, right? And so Microsoft just removed the interview. They actually said, okay, you want to work here, come, and they will have people work on projects without any interview. And then during the project, hiring managers would come and collaborate with those candidates, and then actually run a selection process on the job. So like an on-the-job training. that would then result in people with autism being hired. There is a bakery in the Netherlands. If you want to go out of your comfort zone, there's a bakery in the Netherlands that actually has a no interview, no questions asked hiring process.
Oh, you mean in the Bronx, the Greystone?
Yeah, so there is one in the Bronx, there is one in the Netherlands. But yeah, and you just walk in, you sign up and show up to work. We'll teach you, and then you can work, right?
Yeah.
And so
no interview, just you show up. They call you, come in and work.
Yes. And I think once you think about your hiring process and how is your hiring process made inclusive, that actually opens a lot of new doors for new talent.
One of the things, performance. Yeah, you talk about diversity in hiring. The interview team, the structured scorecard is something you call radical transparency. What's radical transparency?
Discrimination only happens behind closed doors, right? Nobody's going to say, well, I'm not going to hire him because I don't like white males. Right? Nobody's going to say that ever, right? And I could take any stereotypes you want here. Discrimination only happens if you are unconscious bias. We both go sailing. I love that you are a sailor. Okay, great. How relevant is that to the job? Yeah, we don't care. Okay, fine. So that's unconscious bias. And then the actual discrimination, which is like, yeah, I'm not comfortable with this kind of people. This you cannot write if it's transparent, right? So the collaboration here is important. And when I say scorecard with that you fill in with cards down, and then the scorecard results are shared with everybody, right? And then there is no discrimination because you're evaluating human beings based on must achieve for the job, nothing else. What must this person achieve for the job? So the combo of a must achieve scorecard and transparency drives towards a bias-less decision.
So what's next? Is just kind of wrapping up. What do you want to share with us about what's next with SmartRecruiters and for you, or just your day? It's a Friday. We're going to have the weekend. I don't know if that matters.
It's a Friday. The summer is in San Francisco, which means the fog is rolling in. It's cold. I think we are at SmartRecruiters very focused on how can we help people return to work quickly. And really, this is my North Star for the next, I have to say, for the next few years, right? Because it's going to take time to put everybody back to work. And I think TA leaders here have an opportunity to step up. They can step up internally in owning internal mobility and being owning internal mobility. They can step up for their alumni. Airbnb turned their recruiters into alumni placement agents after they had a round of layoff. I think that's an amazing idea. And they can step up for themselves, for their team, by leveraging this moment to actually upgrade their practice. And if you have a few minutes left in your day, then become a reverse recruiter. Pick up the phone to a friend who's been laid off and say, how can I help? It's really easy to do.
Yeah, I love that idea. So I'm going to do it. And a week from today, next Friday, I'll email you who I've helped and what I created.
Yeah, thank you. Put that on LinkedIn.
I'll put it on LinkedIn. So anyone who's watching, recruiters, or anybody who's watching, I challenge you to do you have a hashtag for this? Just reverse recruiter?
Yeah, so it's, reverse recruiting. Hashtag reverse recruiting, yeah.
So if you help somebody, just share it, because that's what we need to be doing now. This, COVID has placed before us a line in the sand. Yes. And who we are on the other side is going to be transformed. Regardless of what we want, it's going to be transformed. We are going to be different, running into it or kicking and screaming. And I think Jerome and I know me say that we should be doing it with arms open and helping folks have a better life, because fundamentally that's what we're up to.
Indeed. And we didn't choose to be in this situation, but we do choose how we respond.
That's right.
It's up to us.
So Jerome, any other parting thoughts before we part ways?
Thank you for having me. I love being on your show, Lorne. It's always a good conversation. Thank you for a long time support of SmartRecruiters as a user and across many events. And I wish you all the best.
Thanks. Same to you. Have a great 2021, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, great. Thank you,
So
Lorne.
you're welcome. If you're watching the video, click like, subscribe, put any comments down here, anything you want to say to Jerome or me, just write it down there and I'll make sure it gets shared. Thanks so much.